Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have some exceptionally horrifying encounters to share with you. Also, a very interesting, yet I don't really know, kind of video clip. Before we get into all this, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon and please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload, shall we? Today's first part of the upload is a very terrifying but very fascinating encounter. A buddy of mine owns a farm in the Ozarks. It has 40 thick wooded acres and hollers in the back of the property that we use for hunting. As far as we know, he and I are the only ones who go on that part of the property. The neighboring landowner, a farmer, says he was chased out late at night by a green orb and will never go back. We also shoot out there every night, so we know there is no human foot traffic there. Us being skeptics, we weren't bothered by the stories. One night, after target shooting, we decided to head out to the woods and back up out of the holler toward his house at the top of the hill. We got out of the woods right where the freshly stocked pond was and decided to see how the fish were doing. We were just outside the tree line on the edge of the field, still far from the house. We heard a scream-like noise coming from the woods far away, almost like a coyote lost from the pack. We screamed back to see how close it would dare to get to us. It was a beautiful night. Actually, we decided to light a cigar and take in the view of the moon as we waited to hear something back. We faced down the hill and blew out our smoke into the air. I noted the air was alarmingly calm to him as my smoke carried on endlessly, never losing its form. I noticed and brought to his attention how there was no noise at all anymore, not even crickets. That's when we got interested and started listening harder. And that's when we heard an owl hoot a couple of times, probably 50 yards away. It actually brought some peace of mind that I wasn't going crazy in the dark or something. We only had one headlamp, by the way, and my buddy was wearing it. At this point, the owl calmed my nerves, but in this time, my buddy let his cigar go out. He was on my left, 1 foot between us. He goes to light his cigar with a torch, gets it lit, begins to puff on it. Clap! A bright, quick, small explosion between our heads like a TNT firecracker goes off, and I flinch down and to the right, because simultaneously I feel shrapnel or pebbles hit the left side of my head. My buddy flinches back because he felt shrapnel or pebbles in the front top of his forehead where the headlamp was. I recovered and looked at him, then his cigar, and then our feet to examine what had just happened. My first instinct was the cigar exploded. I immediately asked, "What the fuck was that?" He grabs his headlamp frantically, turning it off and back on, thinking it was his headlamp that exploded. It continued to work perfectly fine and never stopped to this day. The flash we saw was brighter than the headlamp, and it never shut off in that moment. We stood there with our guns tighter and examined the ground for a pop snapper, a firecracker casing, or something that might have been thrown at us. and we listened to see if someone was messing with us. But after 5 minutes of not being able to explain it, we started to walk back up the rest of the hill and almost got to the house, when it was like the volume in the woods was turned up on a dial. Immediately, as soon as we stepped out, the crickets began to go louder than I had ever heard them before, and the wind was blowing again. We still don't know how to explain it. Was this supernatural, extraterrestrial, a shaman or a shapeshifter, Bigfoot getting revenge on us for shooting in the woods all the time? We actually have gone back many times that night to find an explanation, but haven't had any more encounters beside the feeling of being watched. During one of the day explorations, we found an 8-foot section shaped like a large human that had been lying on its right side near the incident. Buddy laid in it and took a pic for comparison. We would love help explaining this. Today's second encounter. My first experience with the Dogman begins when I was small, pretty young. I can't exactly recall how old I was, but I know that I must have been around 4 or 5 when I first encountered the creature, which is known under many names, most commonly under the name Dogman. At that time when I was young, I would play near my parents' house in an old shed which belonged to an old farmer who lived about a mile away from us. We were living near the Rocky Mountains, and there were many farms in our vicinity. I really loved the pastures and soft fields, especially in the summer. They were truly amazing. But one day, I think it must have been fall, I'm not really sure, but I can remember that the leaves already had a touch of autumn in their essence, and most of the trees had red, yellow, and brown leaves, which in all gave them a wonderful spectrum of many shades of various colors. On this day, I was playing with a friend of mine. We were sitting in the grass not far from the old barn, as we suddenly saw something move in the nearby forest. It was a furry-looking creature, and it reminded me of a bear, but it was walking upright, which made me wonder, because bears normally didn't walk upright. The creature had a slender build and was somewhat canine in appearance. I don't know exactly how tall it was, but I'm sure it had to be at least 8 feet tall. We stared at it in amazement, and because of this, we were neither taken by surprise nor scared. Maybe it was also the daylight which gave us the strength and courage, because at night, these things are a hell of a lot scarier than during the day. This may have something to do with the creature itself. According to some legends, creatures of these manner usually don't wander during the day, because they fear the light, because it represents the creator of our infinite reality. Perhaps that could make sense, but let me carry on with my story, my further accounts of meeting or having contact with this creature. Another, which could be classified as some sort of hybrid. After we noticed the creature walking, it finally stopped and just stared at us and snarled for a moment, then vanished. And when I say vanished, I mean it. It vanished. The creature just vanished from one moment to the next. And that, if I reminisce about for a moment correctly, really gives me the creeps. How could such an animal, such a thing, just simply vanish without a trace? My friend and I searched around the area of the barn, and we saw no trace, no footprints of this creature. That was my first encounter with the Dogman. My next encounter, I was either 9 or 10. It really doesn't matter. I was hiking with an uncle in the Rockies, not too far from my parents' house. I guess it was 30 miles or so. There's a difference to us, though, so bear in mind the term close is relative. We were more or less an hour away from the house. My uncle owned an old log cabin stemming from the 19th century, and he used to go to it with me multiple times. This time, though, I think it must have been not very far from the cabin. About a mile, I would say. Looking back and trying to figure it out, which memory occurred first. I could hear something following us. At first, I just ignored it. But then I thought to myself that it was strange because the sounds I heard reminded me of the creature that I encountered when I was little. The more I thought about this circumstance, the more my mind was trembling by the very thought of having to realize that I was in the proximity of another creature called the Dogman. I remember that I couldn't talk for the rest of our hike to the cabin. When we arrived, I muttered, "Uncle, I think I had saw a Dogman, and I believe that if given a chance it might have followed us." My uncle looked at me, slightly squinting his eyes, and then spoke with his usual harsh but not bad-spoken British Columbian slang. "Hey, son, calm down. The Dogman is not real. There are just wolves and bears out there, although some folks believe that there is a slim possibility of some Sasquatch roaming these forests. They're mostly harmless, so don't worry about it." I was absolutely in shock for a moment. My uncle had just acknowledged that something like the Sasquatch is real, but the Dogman is not? What kind of oxymoron was this? When someone approves of one thing but denies the other. Well, sadly, my uncle is one of these types, in spite of always meaning well. I don't recall when the Dogman appeared again because I had a very odd and eerie feeling that I was being watched by someone, rather something. I can say, from my today's point of view, a mixture of fear and subtle solitude caressed my still slightly disoriented mental state, and I was trying to think of something else but the Dogman. Although I knew that it was always present in my mind, the time passed quickly, and every minute was an eternity for me. For I was deeply indulged, albeit unwillingly driven by my fears and anxieties, which I was not able to control, into my world of thoughts. "Hey you, would you like some Kanoki or Sokum, kid?" My uncle's voice penetrated thought and woke me out of my state of distraught numbness and worries, which had truly encompassed me. Well, he had gone out and fetched some wood. "No thanks. I'll just eat some marshmallow if you have some. Can we make a fire when it gets dark?" I said, hoping to finally relax and enjoy the beautiful wilderness of the Rockies. "Yeah, okay. I'll just get the oven started in the cabin, and then we can make a little campfire nearby. Hope you have recovered from your experience, kid. Don't worry, it was just some odd animal, you know. Some of them just turn out a bit bigger and whinnier, bit different than the rest," my uncle muttered. I looked at him in the eye and said, "Uncle, I guess that everything is okay, but still, some fears are lingering inside of me. Hope that you get the fire already going." My uncle seemed to be in a short kind of haze, and then responded, "Yes, I have, but the fire needs some time to burn. But don't worry, kid, it will be really scorching in a sec." So I waited, and time passed, but not for my individual sense of time. Everything seemed to be very awkward and odd, and I had that feeling again, the same sentiment which I had when I saw that Dogman while walking on the trail to the cabin. I was sure that it must have been lurking somewhere watching us, maybe wanting to attack us. Who could have known for sure? Then my uncle popped up again and said with a slight disgruntled voice, "Come on, boy, let's roast some marshmallows. I guess the fire is okay now, although it doesn't seem to burn the way it should. I guess that's how things go." He grabbed the bag of marshmallows and chucked it over to me. "Oh, before I forget, you can calm yourself by going for a swim. The pond isn't far away. Maybe it'd be good for you." "Okay, Uncle. I'll fetch the bag and join you in no time," I muttered in a quiet voice, for the fears had already taken control over me, and I did not know how I could successfully restrain them, or even get rid of them. Somehow I managed to regain my courage. I joined my uncle, who was already sitting next to the fire, roasting some marshmallows. I took a seat next to him and tried to forget about everything that I had experienced, although I was totally aware that would be a very hard task to fulfill. It didn't take long until daylight faded into darkness of the night, and it crept upon us, like lurking shadows of some unknown place and time. For a while everything seemed fine, but then I sensed that something was moving in the forest behind us, something which was exuding terror, which I could not really describe, for it was too hard to grasp, especially for a young boy of 10 years of age. Then a terrible howl penetrated our silent company. The howl was vicious. It was followed by a snarling and various growls and more silent howls, which, according to me, were even worse because they contained an uncanniness to them. My uncle became nervous, and his face turned more and more anxious. This was the moment that he started believing the things which I had been telling him since my encounter on the trail with the thing which is known as Dogman. Okay, kid, we got a situation going on here. This is not a wolf and not a Sasquatch, I have to admit. That it has kind of freaked me out, and that maybe we should return to the cabin and lock it from the inside. Are you ready? We go in 1, 2, 3 seconds, okay? He whispered. I just nodded. But before my uncle could utter another word, the Dogman, who had been encircling us, leapt out of the forest, grabbed my uncle by his shoulders, and dragged him into the forest. This happened so fast that I was in total shock for a moment. The only thing that I heard from my uncle was his screams, which vanished in the forest. I was shaking and extremely scared, but I tried to keep my cool and hurried into the cabin, locked it from the inside. My heart was pounding now, and I did not know what was going to happen next, so I started praying to soothe my mixed emotions of agony, despair, and fear. After a while, I could hear some sounds coming from the forest, branches and twigs crackling, and then I saw the shadow of the Dogman towering over the cabin. The Dogman could not have been more than 20 feet away from us now, and its red eyes were staring at something, but not at me. In total shock and fear, I was cowering on the floor of the cabin. The steps of the Dogman were headed toward the cabin, and I could feel its encroaching evil. It didn't take long until I heard it scratch against the wooden walls of the cabin, while snorting and snarling in the most vicious manner, which I could ever envision. I don't know how long it took until the beast, this monster, left, for I was petrified whether I would survive to tell this tale. As you see, I could, and I am glad so, that God, that fate, spared my life. So this is my story of my most vivid encounter with the Dogman, which I had and will most certainly always remember. I reckon that they are the most interesting ones, and I guess that the other ones would be, to be correct, mere sightings of the beast, and only lasted a short time. Sadly, my uncle's death was one of the dire aftermaths associated with this cryptid. This monster, although I don't want to be judgmental and bear a grudge against every Dogman, because who am I, who would have the right to judge every one of these creatures, who may be just as good or bad as we? Hence, be vigilant if you should wander into the wilderness of British Columbia, because you never know who you should encounter. It's Dogman country in the wonderful forest of British Columbia. Well, really quick, I apologize for the penmanship or the reading. The penmanship was not penmanship, but how it was typed out to me was the spelling errors, and it was all over the place. But they let me know that it would be in the beginning. I did research and checked his uncle. His death was pawned off as a grizzly bear attack, and there are a shit ton of quote unquote grizzly bear attacks along the area where they were. Not a ton, but you know what I mean, more than normal. And a lot of them are fatal, so it's pretty crazy. But yeah, I just wanted to share that one with you. I've had that on my desk for a couple 6 months now, and I wanted to retype it so it would read better, but I decided to just do it the way it was sent to me, and that way you guys could, check it out. Yeah, the next order of business is going to be a very interesting video, and I'm not claiming this to be a Dogman or a Sasquatch or anything cryptid, but I feel that this is something not natural. And if you look at this little clip, you may have the same feeling I have. So give it a check, and I don't know, talk about it in the comment section below. Alright folks, I hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Some very terrifying encounters, if I do say so myself. Now, that video is fairly old, and a lot of people have shared it. I'm not going to say that a lot of people haven't. I've looked into it. I know that it comes from a gentleman out of Brazil. This gentleman is obsessed with werewolves and such. I don't know if he created it himself. There's another video that he has where, and I've shared this one as well too, it's crawling towards the camera. Now, to me, it kind of feels a little hoaxy. But Brazil has been known for multiple Dogman experiences, just like America. So who knows? I'm definitely not going to say it's, a fraud, but I will say, to me, it does feel a little bit hoaxy, but it could be real. I don't know. But once again, I'm leaving it up to you guys. So with that, thank you for supporting the channel. It truly means the world to me. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and God bless you all.